See Kawasaki's horse robot. I mean, I've been in the research part of robotics for the past 10 years, and definitely having a horse robot was not in my radar. Totally unexpected, extremely exciting. The beauty of that particular design was that the way in which we talk in this channel about the humans and robots being connected, in this robot horse, the connection was on a tactile level. Here we talk about signal level. But for that, the thing that blew my mind was the fact that tactile wise, of course, with other technologies as well, the robot horse slash motorcycle was designed such that it would react to users, to the riders, tactile motions, among other things. And that's is extremely impressive, something that I had not seen in any other humanoids or robot slash human technology. So that was extremely exciting. But today we're going to talk about how the researchers have found ways to look at brain rhythms, brain waves, and see which personality traits we have. In other words, we can read the personality traits of an individual based on their brainwaves activities. And this study came out from the University of Melbourne back in 2020. It's still extremely interesting because we are learning more and more ways in which we can read and or learn about individuals going through just their brain electrical activities, aka brain rhythm. In psychology, the personality traits of humans are categorized to 5 different categories, and the reason they tend to categorize these things, it's not because they want to limit people's individuals' personality, but it's mainly because it's an easier way when you conduct research to have different categories. And in neuroscience, specifically for this study, these big 5 personality traits are usually categorized in the same way as they are being done in psychology. And these scientists looked at the brain waves and brain rhythms of various individuals to see how we can use reading the brain electrical activities to see whether we can also categorize that within these 5 big different personalities that is categorized for coded brain waves to determine the different personalities of these participants. Was that first and foremost they had the participants sit and rate themselves as what their personality is among the 5 different categories, after which they asked them to sit quietly, and then they measured their brainwaves activities via EEG, and that is what we use in determining the brainwaves, neural oscillation of the brain within humans. These scientists then trained specific statistical models with the data that they had gathered from these participants, and the data was their brain electrical activities, to feed into these statistical models to see whether they would be able to set a pattern in which it would correspond with the way that the individuals had rated themselves in terms of their personality with their brain waves active. The result of the study was such that there were 2 of these 5 different personality traits that the scientists realized that they were able to connect the patterns of human brain activities to. And those particular personality trait had something specific within them, which made it a little bit easier for the scientists to determine the patterns in which they were moving so that they could connect their personality. The personality traits of an individual is much more complex than for it to be to be categorized in just 5 different categories. In fact, most of us, if not all of us, have a mixture of all these 5 different categories. In this particular study, because research is in such a way that you cannot really determine everything in just one setting, that's why we continue doing several studies, they were able to do connecting the statistical model and the patterns that they saw with 2 different personalities, as mentioned. And so what these scientists are saying is that this is one of the studies, the first one, to show that it is able to, for us to be able to predict personality from brain rhythms. And we still are in a very early stage. And they also mentioned that if we can find enough evidence that the brain activity is linked to momentary processes but not long-lasting processes, then this might suggest that, for example, these 2 different personality traits that they found emerge out of many small interactions between the brain and the environment, because the personality traits, as mentioned in an individual, changes. And while each and every one of us might have one personality more than the others, we tend to have a combination of all the 5. So what does this all mean? And how can we incorporate them into our research when it comes to humanoid, for example? Well, the beauty of these type of studies where only the brain waves is in question and is being studied is such that we are gaining more and more and more knowledge in terms of what our brain electrical activities are actually doing, what they're communicating with us and within themselves. And what we are learning more and more is that these brain electrical activities is no longer seen just as it being an indicator, for example, in healthcare that somebody's getting an epilepsy attack, for example. But the fact that we are gradually taking baby steps in learning how to read and decode the brain's electrical activities. And our ability to gradually learn how to decode the brain waves and the brain electrical activities is extremely important, in that it could potentially then in the future help us integrate it with, for example, the machines, in this case the symbiotic intelligence that we've been talking about. And that is the way in which then we could become much more informed as to how to exactly decode the brainwaves, because we're still in our infancy in terms of reading the brainwaves and decoding them. But the more we learn about what they do and what type of information they carry, what type of information they elicit within the neurons, for example, the more we'll be able to feed that into, for example, different machines. And that is essentially what the symbiotic intelligence is, and that is where my research has been mainly focused on for the past 10 years. I'll link the studies below so you can read it for yourself if you want more details about the studies. But the truth of the matter is that every single one of these studies, if you think about it, really think about it, is a stepping stone into the greater unknown, because we do need a lot more research studies when it comes to brain waves and electrical activities, because a lot of these neuroscience knowledge that we already have are geared towards the neurons and neurotransmitters and so forth, and these are extremely important, of course, but the truth is that we also do need to learn a lot about the electrical activities, because therein apparently, and we're learning, lies a lot of the information transfer, information translation, exchange of neural activities, orchestration of the information in general, and orchestration of the neuronal activities all apparently happen at the electrical level of the brain. So it's not just the neurons per se. Obviously, neurons are also emanate electricity, electrical activities, but it's not just about off and on. It's not just the digital aspect of it, because a lot of times people have been comparing the brain with the computers, but it's a really misleading way in which we are trying to understand the brain, because in actuality, brain is not really digital. In actuality, is analog. All these wave-like information transfer are analog, which is waves. It's not off and on digital, except for the DNA at the DNA level. Yeah. So anyways, that's all I had for you guys today. I hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.